handle the truth.
The Denise Simon Experience. The Truth Matrix. Vetting, exposing, drilling down to the truth.
Rolling Thunder, this is Hitman, Seat, over. Hitman, this is Rolling Thunder, Seat out.
The Denise Simon Experience. Exposing politics, lies, demagoguery, spin, fraud.
Grid to suppress, Mike Charlie, 4 tree 5, 9er 2 1. Grid to mark, Mike Charlie, 4 7 tree 9er, 8 9er, out.
Promoting individual situational awareness. Question, probe, notice, ask why.
Mark smoke on the deck, 2 rounds AGPT, gas TOT 5-3.
And now, the Denise Simon Experience.
And thanks, ladies and gentlemen, for being with us here on the Denise Simon Experience. This job is fun, even though it's a volunteer job, because I get to have conversations with new people, new friends, and then some old ones. And so I got Major Scott Huesing with us, a Marine with 10 deployments, who is running around the country selling his book, Echo and Ramadi, one of the deadliest places that we knew of, that we had to kind of do twice now. And Scott was with us not too long ago, but I wanted to sell this book, and it's Echo and Ramadi. Echo and Ramadi. Did I say it enough, Major? Echo and Ramadi.
You got it, Denise. You're the best. That's why the book is doing so well in Tampa. And
Echo and Ramadi. Echo,
yeah.
Echo.
You're on
Echo.
the sales team.
Well, welcome back nonetheless.
It's great to be back on.
You've been touring the country, and I like that. So when you're doing these book signings and people come up and, shake your hand and want your autograph, what kind of stories are you hearing? What kind of things are you hearing from the readers and your customers that you didn't expect to hear?
I've never even thought of it as giving my autograph, to be honest. That's the first time I think. Yeah, I think maybe that's just the humility in me. Is I'm just really honored to sign any copy. And before the show, we were talking about Navy Master Chief sent me a book in the mail. I get stacks of them at my post office box, and I love signing them for veterans. And he sent me 2. One was a gift for his best friend, who is a sergeant major in the Marine Corps. So it was a cool Navy Marine Corps team story. And yeah, I do love signing the books. And when I'm out on the road and, I get to meet so many different people and really expand my network. And, for me, every time I speak and every time I go sign books, it's really that power of human connection that makes it all worthwhile. Not just the Marines and families and stories that I wrote about in Echo and Ramadi, but all the people now that read it. And it's a remarkable experience. It really is.
Scott, it has to be just as remarkable as, compiling the book and you being the hub of all of your teammates, if you will, and their families. And now you're doing this, it has to be kind of like the cherry on the banana split for you.
Well, when I wrote the book, I did it to honor their sacrifices and the spirit of the families, but it is, something that I really love doing. Like you, I wake up every day and go to bed every night, sometimes earlier and later than I want to, but as we just talked about. But I really love what I'm doing, and to be able to share this story is just remarkable. And I'll share another one with you that I recently received from Staff Sergeant Phil Morehouse, and I asked him if I could use his name and share the story, and I got an email on my website at echoandramadi.com, and it's a really powerful message that he sent, and he says, "Sir, I'm sure you probably don't remember me, but my name is Staff Sergeant Phil Morehouse, and I was in the S1 shop, the administration shop with Task Force 19 Infantry the night Corporal Libby was shot. And I remember listening to the call on the radio, and I ran across Route Michigan to the combat outpost and the battalion aid station. And I remember standing there watching your convoy come in through the maze of chem lights and the dust cloud surround the trucks as you came to a hard stop. And I remember your Marines carrying Corporal Libby, and I remember the look on your face and every step you took. I remember the look on everyone's faces that night. And I haven't thought about that in 11 years. And he goes on and he closed the email with one simple sentence. He said, yes, we definitely made a difference. And to get feedback like that really validates everything that you put into a book like this. And to see that reflection of something I hadn't seen coming from Phil Morehouse, who was seeing it through a completely different set of eyes, even though I was standing there, was remarkable to me. And that's when you've reached someone, and the book serves more than just telling a story. It's connecting people, and that's what it's about. And I think it's especially important to talk about that connection today on our Gold Star Spouses Day, as we remember our Gold Star spouses and our Gold Star families. Although it's not a nationally recognized holiday, I think it's very important to always remember them because they're such an important part of this family, Denise.
Yeah, I'll always be moved by how much reach that you guys really have that you didn't really know that you do have. I mean, I'm just a little, burned out old woman tennis player, and I'm still very touched and just proud that, I can share some time with you, for instance, on radio. It's a remarkable experience for we civilians, and I don't think that we necessarily have all of the concepts of what kind of fraternity and sorority is knitted together, either whether you're in a forward operating base, you're on a battlefield, or even if you're not, even if you're stateside, working on C-130s. I mean, we will never know that community. And that is, I think, what your book, that the whole message really is. Everybody really does need to go grab this book, Echo and Ramadi. But I don't want to go to the dark side here, but I do want to ask you this question. A couple of months ago, there was a little bit of a spat between a congresswoman in Florida making some comments about Donald Trump's chief of staff, General Kelly. And so General Kelly had to come out on a White House press briefing, and he had to describe what it is like when a fallen soldier comes home. You've actually got a section in your book, and it's, I don't really know, it's a chapter or a subchapter titled Angel. Would you share some of that? And because I know an awful lot of people heard General Kelly and how he described it, and the media actually was very, very moved by it. We had no idea. But then what you Marines do is actually an annex to that story. So would you kind of share that with us on what that ceremony or those ceremonies are?
Yeah, and I'm pretty sure you're talking about Florida Congresswoman Frederica Wilson that came out with that, and not well received by some. But again, it's everybody. It's a difficult subject to talk about. I'm glad that General Kelly came out and addressed it. And the chapter you're talking about is called Angels. And in the book, it was one of these things where you do so many interviews. I did over 75 interviews with Marines, and there were certain points that I hit when I was writing that I needed to find out more about. So I interviewed one of my KC-130 pilots, Mike Perkins. His call sign's Dolby because he's so loud. But
Dolby, yeah.
it was interesting to me because as even as a commander with so many years in the Marine Corps and so many deployments at that point, as a 35-year-old company commander, I really didn't know what happened to my Marines or soldiers from the point of injury on the battlefield in Ramadi or any other city for that matter once they left. You do kind of have to have blind faith in the other components that take care of those people. But when he described it to me and the reverence in which they handle our fallen warriors to get them from the point of injury to Kuwait and then on to Germany and then finally into Dover, Delaware, where they make their final movement back to their final resting place for their families. all of those details that Mike shared with me were things that I never even knew. And I thought, these are going to be keenly interesting to not only military readers, but also every reader that picks up this book, because these are things that are kind of not hidden behind the curtain, but they're just events that we never think take place, and how they affect the people that are doing them. Because for Mike, in the story in that chapter, I mean, that's all he really saw was all of the death and all of the caskets. He didn't see all of the casualties we were inflicting on the enemy and all the insurgents we were killing. To him, it was just Americans dying. And to be able to see it through the lens that he was looking at from was really, really captivating for me to be able to share that part of the story.
Well, Major, it's kind of like the 800-pound gorilla in the room that you just keep walking around. Nobody necessarily wants to address that subject. And I would say it's rewarding to know what happens. So for the sake of the listeners out there, if for nothing else, a page and a half or 2 pages, as Major Scott here describes it, you got to hear it. You got to read it, because it adds another kind of wink and nod to the whole process. Very proud to know it. All right, well, we'll kind of move on from that one if we can. Now, Marines have grit, and I happen to know that because my dad was a Marine. Oh boy! And on top of that, he was a Texan. I don't need to tell you that. And then he was a Leo, so it was kind of like your John Wayne type. But that whole grit thing, you're back in civilian life, as are many of your fellow Marines. What happens to that grit back in civilian life? What kind of value or attribute does it maintain in your lives?
Well, I think for every veteran that transitions out of the military, you never really lose it. I think it becomes a part of who you are, because when you're shaped from a civilian into a Marine, they really do transform you for the better, especially in my case, because growing up, I was, I needed that. And as, even whether you do 4 years or 24 years, I think that becomes a part of you. And throughout my career, I never really let it define me as a person, but it was a big part of who I am. And I'm grateful for that. And for others that transition, sometimes they feel that they didn't do enough, or they didn't have the right job, or they didn't make an impact. And the message is always the same to any veteran I talk to, and I get this a lot, is, well, I only did this. I was just a mechanic, or I was just a signalman in the Navy. I said, no, you weren't. You served your country, and you should be proud of that. I don't care if you were kicking doors in Ramadi or squeezing the trigger and killing bad guys. If you turned a wrench on the truck, or you pumped gas, or you're a pilot, or anything, your service matters. And they make up such a small percentage, as you know, less than 0.5% of the American population that are willing to serve. And I always say, thanks for your service, because it matters. And it really is a team concept. So that discipline and that teamwork, I think if they continue to apply those things when they do transition, they're going to have a lot of success. It's just a really great formula for success that the Marine Corps, as you know, especially, imbues in every single one of its Marines.
Well, for sure, every part of the military, any branch, it is an awful lot of moving parts, and it's an orchestra that has to be well-oiled and well-tuned all the time. And because it's human, there are going to be some mistakes. But given the mission, given the locations, given the lack of assets, it is really remarkable of the craftiness and the cleverness that everybody seems to jump in and give. So I think a lot of between the lines message and spirit of your book is that message, right?
Yeah, it's absolutely about so many lessons that aren't necessarily applicable just to the military, about leadership and team building and overcoming adversity and survival. And again, that power of human connection that really helped us fight and win on the battlefield in the deadliest city of Iraq. But long after that, it still sustains to this day. And it's a dangerous job. And I don't care what branch of the service you're in. I was talking to a couple of Texans this morning on radio, Leland and Larry, and he said his kid was in the Navy. He was a submariner, and he didn't ever expect, he and his wife, that he'd be in any real great danger. But make no mistake about it, it's a dangerous profession, serving in the military. Just the sheer magnitude of the machinery and the movements and all. It is one of the things I probably miss more than anything, is just those massive movements, watching amphibious ships or flying on helicopters, and all of those things synchronized becomes very complex, and it's a very dangerous job. That's even before you get into combat. So again, all of these people that serve and the parents that raise these great kids that are willing to serve, I just am extremely grateful and proud that I was a part of it. And I'm proud to recognize the families and the parents that raise these great kids. And I'm equally as proud of you for helping share this message of, so many great military stories. I mean it. Yeah, you're a big part of that.
Well, I don't ever tell personal parts of me, but I have a cousin that was a former captain of the Enterprise, CVN 65. And I happened to be 8.5 months pregnant with my second son, and they had Dependence Day. So I flew out from Atlanta, Georgia, out to Oakland, and was aboard the Enterprise for an entire day. And of course, I had a bosun's mate that was assigned to me because my water could have broken any minute, and I would have ended up in the ship's hospital or something, delivering a child going under the Golden Gate Bridge. But anyway, I was very, very struck of just the machinery, just the cadence and the rhythm of all of the moving parts on an aircraft carrier.
Yeah, and you were underway. That's remarkable. I mean, most people don't understand. There's 5,000 people on one aircraft carrier.
Yes.
It is literally cats sleeping with dogs. It's an impressive endeavor, though. It really is. And then to stand on the flight deck and watch them catch planes. That are coming in at 300 miles an hour. That's even more mind blowing. So
Harrier takeoffs and landings and mid-air refuelings and all of the moving parts on the flight deck. I mean, it was I've not forgotten it. I have a picture that was taken from some other aircraft of the Enterprise going out under the Golden Gate Bridge with all the planes on the flight deck. And, my cousin did autograph it for me, which was even more special. But nonetheless, enough of the personal stuff, except to say that it is, in fact, there's such rhythm and cadence that everybody does their part. Doesn't matter if you're just driving a forklift or you're painting, links to the anchor chain, which, by the way,
you're absolutely right.
Not even connected to the ship.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And so I was reaching out to a network of truck drivers, long-haul truck drivers, and one of them was asking about Echo and Ramadi, and there's so many components in this book. I said, hey, you got to go to this chapter. There's actually a story about a truck driver, this young kid who I dispatched that drove a tanker truck full of gas, 2,500 gallons of gas, into the heart of Ramadi to flood a insurgent weapons cache that we needed to burn down to the ground. And this kid's rolling out in an unarmored truck in the middle of the city in broad daylight, no less.
The biggest IED that exists, yeah.
I mean, towing a truckload of gas, and all I could think is the size of the ones on that kid, to young, 18, 19-year-old private first class in the Army. I was like, this kid has steel ones. It's really, there's a story in there that I try to connect with just about everybody. You can't tell them all, but there are so many great little vignettes like that make it, entertaining and exciting as well, because there's so many people that can relate to that.
Well, Major Scott, that's a good segue, because here's your next question. You've accepted an invitation to speak to a pile of seniors at a high school, and your presentation is 30 minutes. What are you going to tell them?
I'm going to tell them that if they're looking to really challenge themselves and they're looking to give of themselves and serve their country, there's no better opportunity than joining the military. I wouldn't dissuade any of them to do that. And I would have no problem speaking to any high school that would have me in that regard. And I think it's important too, because Denise, I just wrote an op-ed. It's hanging right now. We're going to probably post it in Daily Wire or Signal about this new generation, about our millennials, and how they continually get thrown under the bus in mainstream media about being too soft, or they just don't get it. They're too immersed in technology. And I wrote this piece because, every generation thinks they've done it better, or it was harder on them, from the greatest generation to the silent to baby boomers, Gen Xers, and I won't ask which one of those you fall into, but I'm a Gen Xer. But I'm a gentleman. I try to maintain that. But, the adage of I walked uphill to school in the snow both ways, I don't want to hear that anymore. I think it doesn't hold any value, because who do you think is fighting in Iraq right now, in Afghanistan? Who do you think is serving at Camp Pendleton, where I live right now? These are millennials, and they're the best our nation has to offer. And they're going to continue to carry that torch, and they're going to continue to carry the mantle of success of America, because that's what we breed in America, not generations. We breed greatness. The bumper stickers don't say America #1 for any other reason than we are #1, because we do things the right way. And despite any political differences, that's an important message too, because if we don't start embracing that and start understanding that, that's where the real responsibility lies of older generations, is be a teacher, be a mentor to these millennials, or the Gen Z, who are 14 years old now. But if they're listening to your show, God bless them, they're great Americans. But to teach these kids what we did wrong, so they don't repeat our mistakes, and we continue to move forward as a nation. I think that's an important message that I try and get out there. So we support our young warriors, we support our younger generation, and embrace the technology, because that's what's helping us fight and win as well.
Well, I mean, a parent is always a parent regardless of how old they are, and they always need to be planting a seed, even if they're a grandparent or a great-grandparent. You got to keep planting a seed in the generations behind you. So in a minute or two that we have left, Major Scotty, what are you going to – it is your same message that you just gave to the high school seniors, would it be different or the same that you would give to a room full of national security civilians?
What do you mean national security?
Well, I mean, you got all these people that are a part of national security. They're in think tanks, or, they're government contractors, in the national security realm. Or is your message the same?
No, I think it would be the same, that we need to learn from our past mistakes in that regard. But, talking to a group like that, I think at that level, there needs to be continuity, and there needs to be some synchronicity between all of the organizations that are providing funding, that are providing programs and systematics to our nation's military, so they can continue to fight and win. Because we, on the battlefield, especially in Ramadi, we weren't fighting politics or strategy or policies. We were fighting the enemy. That was our mission: kill or capture anti-Iraqi forces. And that's what we did every day, 5 or 6 times a day. So to these people that sit in loftier places, that make these blind decisions, that have never experienced that type of savagery on the battlefield, I would say to become better, to become more integrated, and use the military model as some component of success on how we model that in our political structure. And I think we're very fortunate to have people at those senior cabinet level positions like General Mattis, like General Kelly, who can really understand what it's like to fight, what it's like to be part of a team, instead of being so completely divisive day in and day out, which we are whitewashed with in mainstream media. I think that's really the message.
Ladies and gentlemen, the book is Echo in Ramadi. Major Scott Huesing, Marine, thank you. Best of luck with the book. Come back again. We still have a whole lot more to talk about. But
we'll always find something to talk about today.
Yes, sir, we will. More coming your way, ladies and gentlemen. Stay with us.
Hi, thank you for listening. My name is Ron Phillips, and I'm the owner and operations manager of Talk America Radio. It is with great pride that I offer you this 24/7 stream of some of the finest talk radio programming in the country, but I need your support. We are a listener-supported network. That means we need your help to continue to offer the quality programming you're hearing right now. If you're able, please visit talkamericaradio.us and click the Support Us button. Your donation will go a long way in helping us continue to share the American voice. Thank you.
This is Don Newen, co-host of the Drive Time Sit Rep. Join me as I call in to my Intel analyst, Denise Simon, for my daily situation report, or Sit Rep, the Drive Time Sit Rep. Check talkamericaradio.us for more information and show times.
Hi, this is Captain Matt Bruce from the Captain's America Third Watch, and you're listening to Talk America Radio, the new dominant force in conservative talk radio.
Hi, this is Donna Fiducia.
And Don Newen from Cowboy Logic Radio. Ladies and gentlemen, if you don't go to sleep every night completely fatigued from trying to restore America from the destruction that is taking place,
then you're simply not doing enough. Join us every Tuesday night, 9 p.m. Eastern, for Cowboy Logic Radio.
let the restoration begin.
Donald Trump came to Washington vowing to drain the swamp and make government work for the American people. But the swamp creatures in D.C. aren't going down without a fight, and the deep state is determined to overturn the election and keep their gravy train rolling. In these turbulent times, it's critical for patriots to stay engaged and be prepared to defend this president. You can stay up to date on Trump's battle to make America great again by listening to America First Radio with Jim Dawes each weeknight at 10 p.m. Eastern on the Liberty Feed.
Hi, it's Mark Walters from Armed American Radio. You know, for nearly a decade, I've been educating, informing, and entertaining responsibly armed Americans. And during that time together, we've shared some ups and downs, haven't we? Trump's election saved our Supreme Court and no doubt the future of our gun rights for now. But now is not the time to lay down. The enemies of freedom are well-funded and more determined than ever. To keep up with the state of your gun rights, make sure to tune in to Armed American Radio right here on Talk America Radio, the new dominant voice in conservative talk radio.
This is Denise Simon, host of the Denise Simon Experience. When I'm not debating with Donna Fiducia about politics, I listen to Cowboy Logic Radio. Why, you ask? Because outside of my blog, founderscode.com, and my own radio show, the Denise Simon Experience, Cowboy Logic is by far the most entertaining and informative radio show on planet Earth. Plus, Don makes me feel guilty if I don't listen to his radio show every week.
You cannot retreat to your safe spaces. There are no therapy poodles allowed, especially when facing the truth. And that's just how we like it. Straight, hard, conservatarian talk, on the rocks, no chaser. Served up on the Adrian Slade Show. Small, limited government, constitutional conversations, exclusively on Talk America Radio. Every Saturday morning, 9 a.m. on Talk America Radio Liberty.
You're listening to your local news source, WLBB, News Talk 1330 and FM 106.3.
KTA Digital Dallas. Talk America Radio. Simulcasting on WDDQ, Talk 92.1, Adel, Valdosta, Georgia, and WJHC, Talk 107.5, Jasper, Florida.
Ladies and gentlemen, for hanging with us here on the Denise Simon Experience. Woo! Border Patrol and the military. Border Patrol and the military. So what did I do? I went over to grab Rachel Bovard, the Senior Policy Director at Conservative Partnership Initiative, to kind of kind of worked this all out for us. We've got the left that's on one side, we got the right that's on one side, and then we got the agencies that are in the middle, and then the cost, and then we got Mexico's. We got a lot of moving parts, don't we, Rachel? And thanks for being with us.
Yeah, thanks for having me. And yes, so many moving parts all the time.
Okay, well, let me kind of start here because this is not a new phenomenon, and George W. Bush had sent National Guard to the border, a lot of them. I think that at one point he had 6,000, and then Obama had sent 1,600. But here's the other thing I don't think a lot of people understand, and I know that you do. U.S. Southern Command works in Central and South America on a consistent basis. So this is not a new condition or assignment on duties, except that now it's necessarily on our soil. And then the other part of that is we have to remember we've had these cockamamie protests, with the Black Lives Matter and whatnot, that National Guard was also called out in a security intelligence posture. So what's the problem here, Rachel?
Well, many presidents have, as you suggest, sent National Guard troops to the border, and at times it's appropriate for presidents to do that. We do have a border security issue. Everyone points to the statistic that immigration numbers are down, but that doesn't mean that the illegal immigration has stopped. So this is a temporary solution to a problem that Congress really needs to fix. The National Guard can assist the Border Patrol, which is what I think they intend to do. They cannot actually enforce laws. That's up to the Border Patrol, but their assistance there, I think, will be welcome, and it's needed.
Now, here, while we have been bringing this to the headlines, certainly with media, and they've been all over the place, if we watch some of these officials, because now media is running down to talk to Mexican officials, and they want interviews with them, and then we got Vicente Fox that's like, this is shameful, and we've got ambassadors are going, oh, well, Mexico, we are good citizens of the this part of the hemisphere, and we do all that we can. And I would have to say that not enough focus has been put on the lax attitude and posture of Mexico, which I think Donald Trump has really called out in all of this argument, correct?
No, I think that's right. Mexico is teetering on the brink of being a failed state, and everything that goes along with it. It is lawless. You have the government openly at war with the country's largest drug cartels. In 2017, Mexico reached its highest murder rate ever, with 29,000 people being murdered, largely as a result of this open violence from the drug cartels. They haven't really made an effort to secure their borders, and in many cases, they just encouraged people to seek asylum in the United States, and that's a real problem. And especially when you have the actual failed states, to the south of Mexico. I'm speaking specifically of El Salvador, Venezuela, Honduras. All these migrants coming up through Mexico from those countries, basically unimpeded by Mexico, and that's a problem. They come to our borders, and then we are forced to deal with. We saw this several years ago with the waves and waves of unaccompanied minors coming into the United States were not vetted properly by the Obama administration. And based on reports and data from USCIS, those unaccompanied minors have led to a rise in the gang MS-13, the incredibly violent gang, taking up root in the United States. You've seen MS-13 arrests now across 44 states, and we know they have a significant population in at least 22. And this is a gang that is known for its violence. And that's a direct result of Mexico failing to secure its borders and instead leaving that to the United States.
Yeah, and when it comes to failed states, this is particularly what's kind of blows my mind. And I've been on this for 3 years. Of course, I'm just a nobody out here, and that is we are not speaking to curing the core of the problem, and that is the failed states themselves. So that should embarrass Mexico. That should embarrass Honduras or Guatemala or El Salvador. And certainly Maduro in Venezuela is not embarrassable anymore. But this is not a new condition. So when Obama was, in office, where was the State Department in saying we've got to stabilize that little cluster of countries in our hemisphere because it's causing our problems like DACA, right?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of ways to look at this. One is for the U.S. to get involved in these countries, and stabilize their regimes and their governments. Or the second is to simply enhance our own border security, so we aren't dealing with the influx of migrants trying to escape their own governments. I mean, some of these people rightly have a case for asylum, and those cases should be processed, but they need to be done legally. And so, I do think that, where there can be an international effort to sort of step in and deal with a lot of this chaos, that's an option. And then I think another option is simply to say, look, we need to strengthen our border security. We are being threatened by, mass exodus from these states, and that's something we need to take care of on our own borders.
Yeah, and people don't understand that if you are seeking asylum, you, one, have to apply for asylum, and then two, you have to prove why you're in that fear. And Rachel, we've got to the condition we don't even bother with that anymore in the last 10 or so, 12 years. We just kind of go, okay, you can have it, right?
No, that's right. You did see a lot of that with the unaccompanied minors, again, that came kind of flowing across the border under the Obama administration, were not properly vetted. In many cases, they were placed with family members that were already in the country illegally. So they sort of fell off the grid. We were not able to keep track of them. And as a result, again, you've seen a growth in that gang activity because MS-13 recruits cross the border and take advantage of our lax border security to do that and to recruit in areas like New York, in Fredericksburg, in Maryland, in Virginia. All these states have increasing problems with violence and activity from MS-13, and that's a direct result of just allowing an open borders policy when it came to those kids.
Let's trot on over and talk about our governors, because I think almost the last governor that we really saw that just kind of got up into the faces, and I would say literally with a finger pointing, is Jan Brewer. Mm-hmm. And yet we've got Governor Brown, California, who is standing with, I think it's Governor Brown even in Oregon. They're like, oh, well, we don't care. So then it comes down to the municipalities, and we're seeing some of these mayors. It is a financially unsustainable condition, and it's not from a public safety standpoint, although that's a huge component. But I think some of these mayors in these municipalities are looking at the costs and the degradation of their own infrastructure, meaning healthcare, education, housing, and all those other kinds of things. And so nobody has really looked at the cost and the really virtually the destruction, I would say, of education and healthcare and other types of crime. Why is that?
Well, I think you're seeing this play out, on a broad scale, because you're seeing a lot of these governors, say we're going to have sanctuary cities. We are not going to enforce federal immigration law. We're going to let people come here legally, and we're going to look the other way. But yet they still want the government to give them more and more money to do exactly what you're talking about, to rebuild sort of the destruction that it reaps on their cities, to expand a lot of these cities because now they're having overpopulation issues. They want all kinds of grants from the federal government, yet they get to pick and choose which federal laws they get to enforce. And President Trump and Attorney General Jeff Sessions have made this an issue. They've said you can't have it both ways. You either need to decide to enforce the law or you can't have these federal funds. And they're going to be left to deal with the consequences of their immigration enforcement choices, all on their own. I think in this last funding bill, there were a lot of conservatives and supporters of the president who were upset that Congress chose to continue to fund sanctuary cities who openly violate federal law and yet demand federal money. I think that issue is going to remain on the table for the length of Trump's presidency because it is frustrating to a lot of people who want, the country to be law-abiding.
It's a sharp blade on both edges here, because if we're funding sanctuary cities, but I don't think people necessarily thought out the consequence of what happens to public safety if you don't fund sanctuary cities. Now that we have this condition, I mean, if you don't fund them, it doesn't mean the problem goes away. So it's a sharp blade on both sides, right?
No, I mean, it's definitely true. You have the problem that needs to be solved regardless. And I think that, you're seeing efforts to deal with this with the push for passage of Kate's Law, because you're seeing a lot of crime by illegal immigrants who then flee any accountability. You're seeing the growth of gang activity with MS-13 directly related to illegal immigration. So I think when this actually starts to become an issue like this, like we're seeing growth in threats to safety, then I think people are going to start being more aware of this.
All right. So now that we've authorized, I mean, the proclamation has officially been signed by President Trump that says, okay, the National Guard can go to the border. Great. So we have some number that's been thrown out there, 2,000 to 4,000. That doesn't mean that 4,000 are heading there like right now. This is kind of a process that is using previous assignments like under Operation Jumpstart. But now we're kind of in a different world than we were under Operation Jumpstart because we have other things that have been put into the mix, and that would be the countries that we're dealing with, but further, the whole asylum catch and release paradigm, and then the DACA thing. So it isn't as easy model to follow as it has done previously today, correct?
No, you've touched on a lot of the different issues that still exist across the spectrum. President Trump is trying to do what he can to address some of these issues with the authorities he has. And I think you saw that with the troops being sent to the border, with cracking down on sanctuary cities, trying to address the DACA issue. But a lot of this just falls at the feet of Congress. And Congress has just taken itself out of the debate. They just refuse to act on anything. We saw them try to have a debate a couple of months ago, but they put forward anemic efforts they knew were going to fail. But until Congress really steps into this breach, we're still going to have a lot of these problems that you talked about.
Well, we kept hearing about, the super Congress, the Gang of Eight, the immigration reform thing that, that the Senate had passed and had fallen on the floor in the House. But there were, and people were angry what was in it and what wasn't in it and so forth. But nobody is taking that piece of legislation and revisiting it because there were some good things in it. And so those good things that were in it, I would say, should be partially on the table today of what we are going to do on the enforcement side, correct?
Yeah, look, I think have been a lot of ideas put forward on immigration legislation, and those things we should be talking about them. We should be working through them. We should be openly debating them on the House and Senate floor. But instead, the Senate works 2.5 days a week, and they sit in quorum calls and waste time while they're here. They're not working on these issues that are really important, that are timely, that where the stakes are very high. And I think that's incredibly frustrating to people who elected them. And also just anyone who cares about, American sovereignty and border security. These are issues we want to see addressed.
All right. This is a lot of money. The Pentagon just got a lot of money, Rachel. And so Trump has dialed up and said, hey, we want some of that money back because we need it over here for annexing Border Patrol stuff. And so Trump is using the National Guard kind of as his own political tool. What say you?
Well, the Pentagon did get $700 billion in this bill. That's more money, I think, than they know what to do with. And so, Trump is limited in terms of just saying, I want to spend, money here or there. He has to receive congressional authorization for a lot of it. Some of it, very small amounts, he can move around. But yeah, I think he's rightly frustrated. He said, look, he's said to the Congress, hundreds of times, I want you to authorize me to be able to spend the money here, and they won't do it. So yeah, I think he's turning to the National Guard as saying, okay, well, I will work on something that's within my authorities, and the National Guard is. So I'm going to begin to address what I see as a problem by sending them to the border. While I wait on Congress, who's been out of town for the last 2 weeks. So I think you're going to see more of this, I think, with Trump using the authorities he has, in a more active way, because if Congress isn't going to listen to his priorities, he's going to try to enforce, or use the authorities he has currently under current law. And the National Guard is one of them.
Well, I was being kind of devil's advocate and snarky in that, because I know that's the argument that the left is putting forward. And I'm kind of really happy to see that President Trump is kind of pulling some of these levers of power that he has, I don't think he has necessarily used before, maybe because he was trying to give the process or Congress a chance, and they didn't bite at that bait. So now he's having to take these actions.
Yeah. And you've seen presidents across the political spectrum send National Guard to the border. So I don't think the left can plausibly make this argument that Trump is using this as his personal army. You've seen Democrat presidents do this as well.
Precisely. Are there going to be lawsuits now? Because that just kind of seems to be the normal knee-jerk reaction. That the reflex reaction here is, oh, we don't like what Trump is doing, so you got states attorneys general. They're going to start, applying some lawsuits, so cease and desist on this and that. Do we expect some of that as the first deployments happen?
I think yes, because of what you said, this knee-jerk reaction from the left, which is, well, we don't like it, we'll sue it. But I don't think that those lawsuits will be successful. Trump has a clear authority to deploy the National Guard this way. The nexus of power is appropriate and being appropriately used. So they can sue, they can delay, but I don't ultimately think they'll be successful.
Now, Department of Homeland Security Secretary Kirstjen Nielsen was with the media at a White House presser, and she was really quite articulate in her responses. She filled in a lot of the moving parts of the minutia, certainly as it comes to Title 32. And I don't think a lot of people necessarily understand that we have to work not only with Mexico, we have to work with the governors, and then there are certain restraints, certainly when it comes to rules of engagement. So we've got the top Border Patrol people right now, and I would say probably for the next week or so, if not month, at the Pentagon trying to work out all of these levers. Do you think the rules of engagement would be more robust this time going around as opposed to previous presidents on authorizing these assignments?
I do. I think that the Trump administration is not just doing this for show. They're doing it because they feel there is a serious threat at our border. I think that they will definitely stay within the confines of the law, but I think they won't give such a generous interpretation that you've seen previous presidents do. I think they will follow the strict letter of the law when it comes to addressing the risk at the border of constant illegal crossings. And so, I think they obviously still have to work that out, but I do think it will be a pretty strict enforcement.
Rachel, when it comes to the wall itself, there has been a lot of good things, I think, that have come out of this. People necessarily think that you're going to see construction workers along the thousands of miles all of a sudden. They're just going to show up and here we go. And it just isn't that way, because people need to necessarily also understand that in some places the United States does not own the land, that we have got to go through a process of buying the land from private owners and or having to force eminent domain. So when it comes to the slowness of actual construction in the most egregious areas of violation, it is a very tedious legal process, correct?
That is true, although the authority that Department of Homeland Security has under a 1996 statute, which tells them go to build at least 700 miles on the border, they are given the authority to waive any illegal impediment to doing so. I think a lot of the groundwork has been laid for that wall effort, and so it's just a matter at this point of going down and starting that construction. I do think it could move faster than it is currently. But the fact of the matter is right now, nobody's doing anything. And I think that's the concern.
Mexico's going to pay for this.
Yeah, it depends. Obviously, that's a promise that President Trump made on the campaign trail. And he does have several options to compel Mexico to sort of, in a roundabout way, provide the money for this wall. Probably the most viable of those options is through a renegotiated NAFTA deal, which the president has also stated he intends to do. So he could foreseebly, in a renegotiated NAFTA, raise some tariffs on Mexico that would be dedicated to building the wall. And then in a roundabout way, he would be keeping his promise to make Mexico pay to build that wall.
This is going to come way out of left field here, Rachel, and that is I think it was Senator Cruz that introduced the legislation that now that we've got El Chapo Guzman in prison and he's got apparently billions stashed wherever his billions are stashed, that we ought to use some of that as the down payment or to kickstart construction.
Yeah, I think that's a valuable option as well if Senator Cruz can get that legislation across the finish line.
Well, that's kind of curious. I mean, because I don't know that that necessarily has to be legislation. I think it could almost be part of Treasury. So I'm very surprised that we're not going further down that path, because El Chapo Guzman's not the only one that has a bunch of money that we could put into this down payment, such that if we've got 200 miles that are really vulnerable and we need to proceed with, then I think we could begin with that. I'm just kind of curious on why we haven't seen the first cement truck show up in that regard. You?
Well, look, I mean, it's been Congress has made this very difficult for the president, and when by withholding the money, putting a lot of restrictions on the money, and I think that's a huge part of the problem. It's forced the president to get creative about how he would pay for this, which is not something you'd expect, right? You'd expect the president's party to help him keep his political promises, but in this case, Congress has been actively opposing him. And so I think that for that reason, that is holding up a lot of the construction efforts that could be going on, because Congress has made it so difficult. The president's going to have to get creative using existing statutory authority and scraping up money from, like you said, things like maybe El Chapo's hidden reserves, or reprioritizing funding at DHS. He's really going to have to get creative about how he funds the money, since Congress is refusing to do so.
The United States gives billions of dollars to Mexico, and under, if nothing else, the Meritive Initiative. We also give them a military aid. I mean, we got cargo planes that leave San Antonio virtually every day. If we suspend some of that support in order to save some of those dollars to pay for this effort, what does Mexico say?
Well, you also run into an issue of having to get Congress involved for that too. The president, because Congress constitutionally has the power of the purse, the president cannot just redirect money to where he wants it to go. If money is authorized for a specific purpose, it has to be spent for that purpose. So, Congress really controls that process. I obviously think Mexico would fight it tooth and nail. They would be claiming, we are not living up to our side of the agreement, but we could make claims to Mexico that are along a similar line. So, this is something, again, that as much as we want Trump to be able to do what he wants to do, Congress is going to have to get off its butt and really weigh in here, or none of this stuff is going to get accomplished.
And I would also argue if in fact they're successful in cutting off some of those funds, then Mexico is going to put their hands on their hips and go, see, you're no friend, so we're going to go elsewhere. Hello, China. Mexico calling. Hello, Moscow. Mexico City. Here we are. You kind of help. And they would, right?
No, that's a very reasonable fear.
So we're paying for friendship, and we're paying for cooperation that we're not necessarily getting. And of course, the reflex reaction is, cut off the funding. But again, kind of like sanctuary cities, you just can't always do it. It just doesn't always sound to be an easy solution. Well, it's going to be a very interesting thing to watch. I'm sure media is going to be all over the southern border here as these deployments happen. Do you agree?
I do think that, it will be sensationalized. And I as many issues as can be made of this, I'm certain that the mainstream media will make them. So, cue the hysteria.
Yes. Ladies and gentlemen, round of applause for Rachel Bovard, the Senior Director of Policy at the Conservative Partnership Initiative. Thanks so much for your insight and telling us how it all works. And come back again soon.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
All right. More coming your way, ladies and gentlemen. Stay with us.
Handle the truth. The Denise Simon Experience. The Truth Matrix. Vetting, exposing, drilling down to the truth.
Rolling Thunder, this is Hitman. Seat over. Hitman, this is Rolling Thunder. Seat out.
The Denise Simon Experience. Exposing politics, lies, demagoguery, spin, fraud.
Grid to suppress, Mike Charlie, 4 tree 5, 9er 2-1. Grid to mark, Mike Charlie, 4 7 tree 9er, 8 9er, out.
Promoting individual situational awareness. Question, probe, notice, ask why.
Mark smoke on the deck, 2 rounds HEPT, gas TOT 53.
And now, the Denise Simon Experience.
Thanks, ladies and gentlemen, for hanging with us here on the Denise Simon Experience. You know, we're going to change the talking topic here in a big, huge way. We're going to kind of go back over into the world of intelligence, because I argue that we've got some things that are, you know, in front of us that I don't see any media or think tanks really addressing, much less Congress, as they need to. I would say that we're the world of espionage when it comes to intelligence, it comes from information classified and otherwise, is just being sucked here out of the United States, and we've got operatives all over the world that are working against the United States. So a very distant buddy, and I only mean that by miles, is with us, who's been with us before, and that's Brian Tarling. He's the founder and CEO of All Source Intelligence, LLC. And he's, you know, somebody that I collaborate with from time to time, and we kind of share some views and some information here so we can understand some threats and some trends. So, Brian, you know, thanks so much for coming back here on the Denise Simon Experience. Very happy that you could be with us.
Very delighted to be here, Denise. I just wanted to, I'd say well done. I mean, what you just laid out right there, and I can just start with the media. And the mainstream media not even getting it or having a clue is exactly where I wanted to start this conversation. You have people like Sean Hannity, who are in direct contradiction with what Director Mike Pompeo said, that WikiLeaks is a hostile intelligence agency who personally I believe is under directive of the GRU, the Russian intelligence service, and running active measures buck wild. I mean, and you have people that just they don't seem to connect the dots. They don't seem to get it. And I mean, example of this is, okay, you talked about the espionage. There's a deeper matter to that between him just being on and appeasing the fame whore Assange. I know from a fact from listening to the Mark Levin show and listening to Sean Hannity, they've talked about Sean having private entrances into Trump Tower. Trump Tower was bugged. I mean, this is serious business. Okay? You have Assange direct messaging Twitter accounts that he thinks are Sean Hannity. He has a close personal relationship with the president and he needs to wake up. I mean, it's pretty well documented that Russian intelligence is going after the media in both ways, left and right. They are stirring the pot so crazy right now in our country. It's like, I think it's in Putin's master game plan to turn around as fair play. Because what did we do to them during the Cold War? We ran them into the ground economically. And I think he has a divide and conquer strategy that is working today. And I see it over and over and over and over again, the pattern.
I do too, Brian. You know, and I would say that the actions of Russia are very overt. They're really kind of in your face. But that's not all the action.
Question more.
Yeah, because I would also say they're doing a lot of things covertly, and a lot of people don't necessarily understand the relationship between Russia and China does things all in the hacking realm. So they do things in a hidden realm. So
no stranger to ghost now.
Yeah, I mean, we have got two major forces that are working here against the United States. And, you know, when you get hacked or when you are in fact infected in some method, whether they're rogue types that are under, you know, some kind of obscure contract with GRU or China, nobody wants to admit it because they don't want to have to say we have these vulnerabilities. And, you know, we are not, I would say, prepared to protect data as we need to protect data. Especially this week when the Department of the Interior came out and said after that OPM hack, there was all kinds of malware that was left behind where those computers that were housing OPM databases were communicating.
And the irony
with
of it
Russia.
is the agencies that were guarding that information were using Kaspersky.
Yes.
It's just been routed, as of recently. And you have people that you have the insider threat.
Exactly.
That's not being guarded against. That's ultimately the issue. Social engineering they're not a lot of it's classic espionage, but the overt method of it uses the internet. I mean, it's collected through open source intelligence. It's collected from people not being really careful about operational security in high places. Not enough overwatch in departments. There's a lot of variables that attribute to this problem. However, the fallout it's not being dealt with.
Every one of these actions, I mean, when it comes to that OPM hack, an inspector general was sent in to actually do a after action report, if you will, and found that the IT people assigned to those computers and that major hack just didn't do. I mean, they're almost like they were rookies. And what is particularly fascinating is the FBI's got some major IT wing.
Balls.
Well, they do that, but they do have some remarkable talent and skill, and they weren't called in, which tells me something else is wrong. And the other thing is, where's the NSA?
I hear you. They are stand down orders. And I'm going to say this: my time at Vigilant, I experienced a lot of frustration that way. I even have written to other directors telling them that was the situation. I'm extremely frustrated because they're seeing target-rich environments and nothing done, and you can't get a green light, and you've got probable cause, you've got all the FOIA, you've got everything you need for an inquiry, and nothing happens. And you don't need to know what direct action was taken, but you can definitely see that none was taken, many times.
Brian, it almost looks to me as though that there is a ownership/power struggle on who's going to take the lead and who wants it and who actually doesn't want it that should have it, because I think the size and scope of the problem is so big.
The FOIA abuses of the previous administration is what it comes down to. Is that power absolutely corrupting and being used for the way that it was deemed best to be used, instead of being used for what it's really supposed to be used for. And there are people that, throughout the whole United States that use it for what it's really supposed to be used for in various ways. FBI, International Defense Intelligence Agency, you name it.
Well, everything ends up with the political.
Yeah, it was actually, from what I understand from Dan Bongino, it was Mike Rogers who went to Trump and told him that, it was being abused.
Well, we are where we are. It's kind of like, now what? And yeah. I would argue that we've got two other things that are necessarily facing us. And I don't hear it when I listen to these congressional hearings with these experts inside government and outside government. It's like they're almost missing the 800-pound gorilla in the room. And it's because the people want some kind of plausible deniability, and they don't want to take blame. And things are so convoluted and so bureaucratic that, in the meantime, we're going through all of these machinations, and yet we have the Chinas and the North Koreas and the Irans and the Russias. They're still continuing their active measures, their hybrid warfare, and we are not safeguarding the things that we need to be safeguarded. I mean, I can't believe that we're not running audits internally all through pretty much every agency there is. And I would also introduce academia, where we're looking for malware. And then we have the component of artificial intelligence and 5G, which is the opportunities there are great, but the vulnerabilities, even in those technologies, are
That's being studied a lot, though, by like DARPA and other agencies. You know, of giving artificial intelligence the ability to choose whether to take life or not. And I sit there and I think about questions like that, and I go, well, we may do that, but what about Russia and China? Will they do that?
Exactly. Well, I mean, artificial intelligence says, you know, you've got human input, and then you've got, you know, quantum computing.
Artificial intelligence is just a representation of who wrote it.
Correct.
It's no better than the person who wrote it.
Well, and then it takes out, then again, you come back to plausible deniability, because you get to take out, well, the human factor, because they can say the machine did it. Well, you know, it's data, it's bad data in, bad data out, or good data in, bad data out, because then you have to interpret the output of artificial intelligence, right?
Right. And ultimately, the machine cannot make that decision. It has to be programmed to be able to make that decision. It doesn't have a will. So ultimately, what you're saying, it all boils down to, it all has to be programmed into the artificial intelligence. And it can make collective, educated guesses about topics, but it also, its backbone is written by a human whose mind inputted algorithms for hours and hours and hours and hours and hours and hours and hours, and that's what they like to do. They like to do Boolean algebra and write representations, you know, all day long in Euclidean geometry, and giving it an idea how to see in polygons. So still, though, it's still ran and programmed by a human. And if that artificial intelligence is given the ability to say anything, it still has to be done that by a human.
Well,
I don't think it'll ever override itself to give itself complete autonomy and like take over everything, like Skynet situation. If you see what I'm getting at.
Well, I hope you're right, but I'm not convinced of that.
You don't think there would be a master key override always?
Well, I mean, you can override, but I mean, I think from the output, I mean, it's almost like the humans are deferring the analysis back to the machines, back to the computing. And I'm a little nervous on all of that. I mean, we're doing certainly exploration. We're doing experimentation now.
Google had to shut down a machine that started writing its own language. It does get scary.
Then you have to kind of scale to the problem. I know the Defense Department is using some artificial intelligence today. I mean, with some success, because I mean they're able to take all the data that CIA.
I was on contract and where I see AI at right now. I was on contract for a company here in the Washington State. They did AI systems for Paul Allen's company, Vulcan Enterprises, Toyota Research Institute, NASA, Mercedes. And what application at right now that AI has is for like self-driving vehicles. And what just happened? The car killed somebody. Who's liable? Who's liable?
Oh, it's the machine.
It's the machine, yeah. I see what you're getting at. So who's liable and what's plausibly deniable? That's a question for lawyers. That's what I guess maybe there needs to be a synergy or a council on oversight onto artificial intelligence. So if a company makes something, though, it seems like the company is liable. So they need to be able to. If they're making a machine, whether it's called artificial intelligence or whatever, and it unlawfully takes life, then the manufacturer is liable.
Sure.
That's what common sense would tell me.
And then going through these, Brian, congressional hearings, for instance, on what is actually a declaration of war when you've got outside forces, let's say, for instance, China and Russia using artificial intelligence, and or hacking that come into the United States and destroy something or infect something that is destruction.
That's the whole nitty-gritty of the whole situation, because quantum computers and artificial intelligence can crack codes way faster than any human can.
Mm-hmm.
That's where it gets scary, because China could have a computer that's as powerful as a whole football field full of computers to crack code, and then you have to sit there and go, wow, nothing's secure. And then it becomes a quantum race, and who can quantum leap the other adversary in a situation like that. And if we're going to take quantum computing and add it to, because that's also going to branch out into just really just standard warfare, because your area of denial and defense, it's going to run scenarios, and it's going to find the holes in any weaknesses faster than any general can make a decision to react. So it's a game changer.
And therein lies where the gut instinct is, I would say, it still exists, but it's almost eliminated, because the analysis and the decision outputs are coming from artificial intelligence, and so the gut instinct is challenged.
And what's to say that decision is ultimately right?
Correct.
Okay, and I've worked with artificial intelligence. I've worked with recorded future software. It goes through and finds probability ratings in open source intelligence on however you want to segment it. If you wanted to see about riots, if you wanted to see about crime or poverty in an area, or you wanted to see about terrorism attacks in another country, and you were looking for, activity or indicators that there's a lot of activity going here, so we might want to go look there. The machine doesn't have the ability right now to tell you to go do something. Right now, it only has the ability to say heads up.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It's what I've actually seen as what is like applicable and usable in artificial intelligence in warfare. It would be something like Recorded Future or Palantir or Splunk, software that takes data open source, and it gives you a probability rating, and it will give you, comparisons of other situations in, so you can make an analysis. But the human still has to look at all the data that the computer is giving it. It's kind of like an R2-D2. It's a centaur at this point. It will. So there will probably be abuses of people writing artificial intelligence nefariously. Do I hope it's not done here? Absolutely. I do have confidence it won't be. Pretty much. When I look at how technology is developed in our country, it all seems top secret and clandestine, but eventually it goes for the ultimate good of the country.
Well, you can get some real indicators. If you look at what Google is doing with artificial intelligence or Skunkworks or, Gradient or, DeepMind and any of these other kinds of things, if you start taking a long look at, poking your nose at what they're saying and what they're putting out as compared to some of their others in the same industry, we can begin to make some of our own forecasts and I would say behave or act accordingly. But I would say it's here, and it's continuing to go through these evolutions. And we little people out here don't have a say-so in any of this, but we are deeply affected when it comes to, I would say, technology and the use of technology, phone apps, Internet of Things. So it's certainly something that we have to watch and see how we're going to behave effectively, correct?
Yes, and I think that goes for a wide spectrum, just all across science, even like the genetic altering, the CRISPR machines and things like that. It's like we're going into whole new ethical questions with what's becoming available to mankind. It's
ethical. What a fascinating word. Actually, his definition has been changed by the hour.
Right. That remains open to interpretation. I get it. Going by standard definitions, hopefully people understand what we're getting at. But it's just it's the ethics. People can get like gene test, like you can make yourself into a guinea pig. I was reading in one of these, like you can make yourself a gene test kit. That doesn't seem, I mean, we have laws. You can't go get cocaine and just make yourself a cocaine guinea pig. They don't know the effects of what they're doing to themselves, and there's no laws against it. So I've thought about like that type of stuff in hypothetical thinking ways. It's just, we're living in fascinating times.
Fascinating. And I would say, when things like Facebook or your interactions on Google or Yahoo or Twitter or anything else, they're using our data. So they have stolen us as the guinea pigs to go through this legacy data, because it's stuff that's already happened. It's all, the output's already there, such that it is affecting this interpretation of the data, right or wrong. And so,
doing it.
Yeah, policies.
Just like we have on Facebook and Twitter with our feeds, because the algorithms are skewed.
Yes. Well, I think that for the sake of the listeners, that when it comes to artificial intelligence, when it comes to data, when it comes to who's stealing what they're doing with it, I would say that we need to rethink our behavior when we get on any kind of interaction with the internet, and whatever platform that might be, whether you're just purchasing something or whether you're in the social media realm. And now
I have a quick suggestion for your listeners. If you buy stuff online, ask Jim Angleton at Aegis Financial Services. He'll tell you I recommend them highly for any like banking or financial security concerns you may have. Is buy prepaid cards. Buy it. Leave 25 cents on there. Leave your nest egg isolated. Do things like LifeLock. Play smart. I don't really worry about getting hacked, because I don't. There's not nudies floating around with me, and I don't, say things that I would not say just in public.
Sure. Well, what you've done is eliminate your vulnerabilities, and I think all of us need to do that, and then to certainly pay attention to what vulnerabilities we have and what could be coming after us. And I would suggest even to the listeners to think of encryption, because it's not a fix-all, but it is
because that goes back to the quantum computing discussion we just had. That becomes a risk for hacking and cracking. Those computers just probably could go on and on forever trying to outdo each other.
Exactly.
If you think about it. So it'll always be the next and the latest greatest thing with encryption. But today, even like I said on the first interview, though, Wi-Fi is kind of giving me, you have to use a lot more sophisticated means to crack it.
Correct.
Instead of versus what we have now, Wi-Fi, and you have higher bandwidth. I think things are going to get better, and then there'll be setbacks, because there always is.
Well, Brian Tarling, I want to thank you. I mean, we come to our end of our time. It goes fast, but thanks for being with us on the Denise Simon Experience, and we'll tap you on the shoulder to come back again real soon.
Hi, thank you for listening. My name is Ron Phillips, and I'm the owner and operations manager of Talk America Radio. It is with great pride that I offer you this 24/7 stream of some of the finest talk radio programming in the country, but I need your support. We are a listener-supported network. That means we need your help to continue to offer the quality programming you're hearing right now. If you're able, please visit talkamericaradio.us and click the Support Us button. Your donation will go a long way in helping us continue to share the American voice. Thank you.
This is Don Newen, co-host of the Drive Time Sit Rep. Join me as I call into my Intel analyst, Denise Simon, for my daily situation report, or Sit Rep. The Drive Time Sit Rep. Check talkamericaradio.us for more information and show times.
Let me talk to you, black people. When you vote for blacks and put them in office under the banner of the Democrat Party, please explain to me what black people get as a result. This was not a nap that we have been taking. We are in a coma. You know what the interesting thing about pensions is? That's today's money given to people who ain't doing nothing for you today. Get off that black Democrat tit that they've been sucking on. Your country is being stolen from you, and the promise is being stolen from your children, and they're telling you it's all right while the rest of the world is trying to lap us. Well, why are we doing so poorly? 2 words: teachers' unions. Are you kidding me?
Black Man Thinking, Monday nights, 9 p.m.
This is Denise Simon, host of the Denise Simon Experience. When I'm not debating with Donna Fiducia about politics, I listen to Cowboy Logic Radio. Why, you ask? Because outside of my blog, founderscode.com, and my own radio show, the Denise Simon Experience, Cowboy Logic is by far the most entertaining and informative radio show on planet Earth. Plus, Don makes me feel guilty if I don't listen to his radio show every week.
You're listening to your local news source, WLBB, News Talk 1330 and FM 106.3.
KTA Digital Dallas. Talk America Radio. Simulcasting on WDDQ, Talk 92.1, Adel, Valdosta, Georgia, and WJHC, Talk 107.5, Jasper, Florida.
And thanks, ladies and gentlemen, for staying with us here on the Denise Simon Experience. I've got the privilege of having Linda Wall with us. And why is Linda with us? Well, she's guilty of being a friend, and I'm going to work on her to be mine, because we're going to discuss a case here that, since I learned about it, oh God, it's just been bugging me and bugging me and bugging me. But Linda has actually been making the radio rounds, and I don't want to steal her thunder because there's so many moving parts to this thing. But Linda, thanks for being with us here. And just so you know, you're talking to a solutions-based radio host. So
sounds good to me.
So we're going to talk about a mom, and this mom is her name is Lisa Miller, and Lisa has a daughter by the name of Isabel, who I think is probably about to be 16 years old, if I'm not mistaken. And so, Linda, if you would, I actually looked up the FBI file the other day too, so I mean, she does have one. If you would give a thumbnail sketch of this case, because you need to set the table on this, because where I'm going to take you is towards the solution side after you kind of give a summary of what this case is about.
Okay. Lisa Miller was practicing homosexuality. She became involved in a civil union. The couple decided they wanted to have a child, so there was in vitro fertilization. And during the course of all this, Lisa became born-again Christian. And she took it to heart that what she was doing was wrong in the sight of God, and so she made the steps to remove herself from the relationship, to dissolve the civil union, and to move on following in the ways that God's Word describes that we should live. And so she's in trouble now and charged with international kidnapping because she did all of that. And a former lesbian partner refused to adopt this child twice when Lisa asked, so she didn't take any reins as a mother when they were together. But after the fact, when the civil union was dissolved, she decided to sue for custody of this little girl. And so after court-ordered visitation, when the child hadn't seen this woman for 2.5 years, so at 5, this little child was forced to go on visitations with a practicing lesbian and was exposed to that lifestyle and many things that were contrary to the Christian faith. So eventually the court ordered Lisa to give up her biological daughter. And prior to that, she decided she was leaving America. She didn't want her child to be the poster child for the GLBT crusade, and she wanted to follow the Lord and be a missionary. So she left the country with her daughter. After that, the court ruled that the little girl belonged to the other lady, and now she is wanted for kidnapping her own daughter.
Just remarkable. And, you know, I the first thing out of my, as soon as my feet touched the floor this morning, I was thinking to myself, you know, there was a time that we used to say the justice system and the court system works. And now we can't necessarily say that anymore, can we?
No, we can't. I've watched so many things occur during the 6.5 years that I was connected during the court cases that it just spun my head to believe they were getting away with these erroneous moves in the court system.
Well, it's remarkable that a court system can remove a daughter from the biological mother and hand the daughter off to somebody who has virtually no connective tissue, and I mean that literally, I guess, in this regard. And was this case done by just a judge, or was there a jury?
Actually, in Virginia, we went through a judge ruling in Lisa's hometown of Winchester, Virginia, basing his ruling on Virginia's law that what happened in Vermont did not matter in Virginia because Virginia did not honor civil unions or any benefits of it from anywhere. And he ruled Lisa the single parent, and that she had the right to say who her daughter spent time with. And of course, an appeal was filed by the opposition, and a panel of 3 judges in the most liberal area of Virginia heard, in Northern Virginia near D.C., heard this hearing, and they ruled that Virginia didn't have its jurisdiction over this case, so it was sent to Vermont. And from that moment on, Lisa continued to lose everything that was going on.
A couple other people have been, I guess, have the guilty sentence applied to them, and those are at least 1 or 2 that may have helped Lisa along the way, correct?
Correct. And bear in mind that when a person is a real Christian, they live their faith 24/7. It's not something they do when they walk into a building on Sundays or 3 times a week. It's something that is in them, and it's a lifestyle, so to speak. And these individuals that helped along the way were simply living a Christian life. The pastor is Ken Miller, which is an Amish Mennonite pastor. They don't even vote. They are non-political. He was simply assisting a sister in the Lord, a single mom who needed help. But yet he just was released from federal prison after serving 2 years for aiding and abetting in this international kidnapping.
And your relationship, the reason you're here on the Denise Simon Experience is because you didn't aid and abet other than just being a friend to Lisa, correct?
Correct.
And you're guilty.
There is a lawsuit against me, about 22 pages of accusations that I have had to prove my innocence, that everything they've accused me of, I was simply living my Christian life. Anything I would do to help someone in need and be a friend. You're right. That's a good way to put it, that we're all in trouble for being Christian friends to Christians.
or just being Christian, much less not even, I mean, it's kind of a double whammy. You're a friend, whether you're Christian or not, and then it's a double whammy because you're a Christian friend, and you're doing what the Christian doctrine tells us that we are to do, correct?
Exactly.
Okay. So when are you and I going to...
I'm sorry.
When are we going to go walk the halls of Congress and start slamming doors?
Well, I do think there's a promise of something happening in the favor of Lisa with this different administration. There have been Christians helped or get free in other countries who are in prison for living their Christian faith. And so it is my goal to go through the right doors and with the right help, seek help for Lisa and all of the people connected that, hey, they were simply living their Christian faith, and you have no right, according to the U.S. Constitution, to infringe upon their exercise of their faith.
Mm-hmm. And we sure saw a lot of that in the previous administration.
Yes, we did.
If for nothing else, the Little Sisters of the Poor.
Exactly.
All right. So, Linda, there's something called a White House petition, that you can put a petition up on the White House such that after, I don't know, I think it was supposed to be 100,000 signatures, that the president is supposed to respond to the petition.
Oh, wow.
Oh, yeah. Uh-huh.
That sounds like an inviting piece of action to take.
Well, solutions-based radio show host here. So, I actually think that a petition needs to go up on this White House website in order to whatever back channels are going into this White House to, get this case in front of whoever it is, White House legal counsel or whatever. This might put another channel to that, is to put up a White House. But I would include, it isn't just a matter of pardoning or exonerating Lisa Miller, but also Ken Miller, correct?
Yes, and a Virginia businessman who is in an appeals hearing today.
Wow. There's also another outlet, and I haven't been to it in a while, but there's something called change.org, which I think may be another channel, such that, you can kind of get several tracks going here, several, ramps that are, have a call to action on this particular case. Now, it seems that all of this, let me ask this question. Where did Lisa's former partner get this concept and or legal representation and the funds in order to pursue this case such that she got custody of Isabella?
Well, the big GLBT law firms took the case over. They have wanted to make the Lisa Miller case the equivalent to Roe versus Wade.
Mm-hmm. The benchmark.
Yes. And so, this morning I've been researching what errors were committed and what lies told in the Roe versus Wade case, because the same thing is happening in this case.
And this case has a long history. I mean, this goes back to what? Did I get it right? It's 2004?
That's correct.
Okay. We know that we have the Southern Poverty Law Center in this equation, correct?
Correct.
All right. I would also, as part of the change.org or the White House petition, think that it's about time that more exposure goes to the Southern Poverty Law Center, because, this is about the most unchristian, anti-Christian case that I know of. I'm sure there's others out there other than the Little Sisters of the Poor and, the Green family with Hobby Lobby and whatnot.
Right.
But this one deals with a fact that Lisa has left the country with her daughter, her biological daughter, and cannot come back to the United States.
Correct.
That right there is an outrage.
You would think in a country founded upon Judeo-Christian principles that someone would not have to leave America to be a Christian.
with their daughter in order to protect the daughter.
Exactly.
Now, when she left the country, I think she's in a country, and I don't want to give it away, although it is out there, that I don't think has an extradition treaty with the United States. So I don't think she can be extradited. Now, the daughter herself is not guilty of anything, but she can't even come back to the United States either, can she? Otherwise, then her mother, she could be arrested for not coughing up the mom, right?
Most likely that is what would happen to her. I had not thought about it until recently, and someone, expressed that to me, that she's not going to reveal where her mom is, and they will arrest her for not doing that. So I think, the highest, most powerful person or position in America is probably the only solution to making these people free. Is to come out of White House or the Department of Justice. And, long time ago, there was a similar situation in history, and almost everybody knows Moses because that seems to be a topic that Hollywood will do. But we know that the government had control of God's people, and they wanted to be free to worship him. And miraculously, they were freed, of course, after God sent many plagues against that Pharaoh of that country. So, I still see the same God as the creator of everything, and that this is possible because all things are possible through him. So, I feel called to do this again. It had not been in my life for probably the last 6 or 7 years, but when I saw that the pastor was getting freed, it was time to meet him. I wanted to meet him, Denise, this man who should, and, I probably can arrange that.
Me too.
It was so real to attend that church that welcomed him home. It wasn't about him. They were glorifying the fact that God had helped him get through that 2-year sentence. And also they glorified the fact that a mother and daughter were together free, being free to worship the Lord.
Wherever they may be.
Phenomenal.
Linda, is there any member of Congress out of Virginia, Vermont, New York, that this case has reached their desk in any way, shape, or form?
No. There isn't. And actually, since my life has journeyed me back into this, I have been paying more attention to my congressman, and I do have a plan to educate him on it because I see what he's doing in Washington and how he is standing firm. So I do plan on approaching him about it.
Who is your congressman?
Tom Garrett is his name.
Okay.
And go ahead.
She was sentenced by a Virginia court, correct?
No, Vermont.
Vermont. Okay, Vermont, the land of the free. All right.
Yes.
Okay. Well, the governor of that state can also issue a pardon, I think. Well, maybe not, because I think this is a federal charge, correct?
It's a federal charge, yeah.
Yeah, all right.
I like the way you think, Denise.
Well, I just, if for nothing else, the governor of Vermont can make an appeal to, the Department of Justice or to the White House counsel and say, this just doesn't sit well, and it's an embarrassment, I would say, to the legal system. And maybe there ought to be some FOIA, so Freedom of Information Act filings issued so we can know what role, what evidence the FBI now has that they have a file on her, and to see all the other players in this thing. Do you think?
Hey, this is a new thought to me. I don't know a lot about how you obtain that or go for that. I mean, I hadn't even looked at the FBI files to see, assuming, it's there. I know that the U.S. Marshals have been to some of the countries trying to find them.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah. and a large amount of money, taxpayer money, has been spent for this poor Christian mom and little girl to try to make them come back to America so they can't live their lives as Christians. I think the president would be very interested to see the dollar figure that's been spent on this situation, since he's such a businessman.
Yes, exactly. I cannot decide which part of this entire case is the worst. I can't.
Well, it has no ending, it's all connected.
Yes. And I can't tell if it's the worst because of the legal system, how broken that is, or it's the worst because I'm assuming that Lisa and Isabella are safe with where they are and what they're doing, and things are going relatively well where they are, based on if they were back here in the United States, because they would all come up, erupt again, and I think at some point it's going to have to. But I can't really figure out which part of this case I hate the worst. Which one should I hate the worst, Linda?
I think it's the tragedy that in this nation that it's being allowed for Christianity to be criminalized, whether it's this case or whether it's the baker or the photographer or any of them out there, when, the Constitution plainly states that you can't have laws that infringe upon your exercise of religion. And Christianity is not a religion that is exercised by going to confession. It's by living out in the world. I mean, Christ made it very clear that we were his messengers and that everywhere we went, we were to be either the light or the salt of the earth.
Well, I got into an argument with somebody the other day because we're having all this Second Amendment, battle going on, and I argue that if we cared as much about the Second Amendment as we did the First, we could have protected things in the First, and they wouldn't have tried all these things with the Second.
Exactly.
And they're literally chewing away inch by inch, letter by letter, action by action, the protections of the First Amendment. And we're clearly seeing it in the Fourth Amendment too, but that's a topic for a whole nother day. Now, I'm assuming that there was more than one law firm outside of Southern Poverty Law Center that was involved in this case, helping out Lisa's former partner, correct?
Yeah, and actually, I'm not sure if they actually were the ones, or Lambda Legal. It's been so many years since I was following who was working for the other side. Now, the Southern Poverty Law Center is the one involved in the lawsuit against a bunch of us that helped her.
But was Liberty University involved in this too at one point?
Yes.
Helping out Lisa?
Well, they tried to paint that picture that, and the bottom line here is they're trying to go after Jerry Falwell, the Falwell name up there. They couldn't stand, I call him Big Jerry, but Dad, Jerry Falwell Sr., the gay GLBTs couldn't stand him because he called an ace and a spade a spade. And so they're still trying to go after the Falwell name up here at Liberty University.
Which continues the war on religion, the war on Christianity, way beyond Lisa and Isabella, correct?
Correct.
Well, if I'm not mistaken, President Trump signed some kind of piece of legislation protecting religion. And as a consequence, I don't know if that piece of legislation is helpful in this case. I mean, she's already been sentenced, and the appeals process is come and gone, correct?
Yeah, and actually one of the saddest parts of this story is it never was heard by the Virginia Supreme Court. Due to, now there was a court hearing. We went, we had a rally outside, but due to an error, a technical error of some sort in the filing, they didn't hear the case, and they could not reapply for it to be heard by the Virginia Supreme Court.
What a shameful system.
Yes. And, my thought then was, Denise, we're not talking about a bunch of parking tickets. We're talking about a little girl, a child.
And 2 American citizens that had to flee the country.
Well, see, they hadn't even been, they weren't even involved at that point. This was
right.
Eons ago. And yes, and the thing to me is, look, this thing is still occurring. The dominoes are still falling. So by golly, we better bring this thing out in the open, because it has a meaning for every single Christian in this country.
Indeed, it does. Well, ladies and gentlemen, if you trot on over to Right Wing Watch, can't say that 3 times. I have to do it carefully because it doesn't come out of my mouth right. There's a description of what is happening here, and Linda's making the rounds here on radio, and I'm just so pleased, Linda, that you could be with us in this regard. It's something to keep up with, and if for nothing else, I would say, where's the outrage? Because this thing has been festering since I learned about this case, and when you start walking the halls of Congress, let me know, because I want to go with you.
Sounds good to me. The thing that I'm having a challenge with is, how do you put this whole thing in a nutshell? To present it to individuals. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's quite a task. Maybe someone must have that calling.
Well, PowerPoint presentation and burn it to a CD and just pass it around, I guess. I don't know.
Sounds like a plan.
Linda Wall, thank you very much for being a friend, and thank you very much for your limitless attention and energy in this. And I would say, if for nothing else, thank you for the dedication to the Christian doctrine, the fidelity to it, and trying to pass that torch on wherever it needs to be. Because I mean, it's I would say it's somewhat lost now. But Linda Wall, thank you, and I'm going to stay in touch with you, because this is burning in my belly. But thank you.
Thank you, Denise. Appreciate it.
All right. Thanks, ladies and gentlemen, for being with us here on the Denise Simon Experience, and we'll see you again very soon.